The reason we consider Coraline to qualify as a horror story on this channel has a lot to do with horrifying nightmare creatures, like the Beldam and her empty, button-eyed underlings. It's easy to overlook other supernatural aspects of the story, like a talking cat and the mysterious trio of ghost children. These spirits were victims of the other mother, whose souls were captured and eaten away at over the years, to the point that they no longer had their own identities. But before their untimely kidnappings, these three children were individuals with their own unique stories. To learn how each of their life experiences ultimately helped Coraline, stick around to the end of this video. This lesson is sponsored by Audible. Welcome to Horror History. The book and movie adaptation of Coraline are very similar, but one big difference is the creation of a character named Wybie in the movie, whose great aunt was a casualty of the other mother and plays a part in the story as the sweet ghost girl. No such familial connection was present in the book. Instead, author Neil Gaiman does leave us some clues that can help us figure out what these kids' lives may have been like. For example, I researched the usage of words in the Ghost Boys vocabulary and found the only time period where each of these words were popular in the lexicon was from 1750 to 1850, also known as the Georgian era of Great Britain. So let's take it back a few centuries to the beginning of his story. The small ghost boy likely came from a wealthy family who lived on the plot of land that would eventually become the location of the apartments where the Jones family lived. There are multiple times when the boy mentions his governess. A governess is a woman employed to teach and train school-age children in a private household. They were usually hired by rich European families and have become somewhat rare since World War I. While the movie Coraline takes place in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, the novella is set in the United Kingdom. Coraline's father takes a train to spend the day in London in Chapter 3. The Ghost Boy's family probably built and owned the house where the story is set. By the time of Coraline's era, it had been split up into 4 separate flats rented out as apartments. Mr. Bobo's level 3 flat is actually renovated from an attic. Since the Ghost Boys family is implied to be very wealthy, it makes sense that they'd have this huge estate, so big that it had to be split up once the family no longer lived there. It seems that one of the boys' hobbies was hoop rolling, an English sport and children's game where the participant would try to use a stick to keep a hoop or wheel upright and perform tricks. The image of the governess carrying his hoop and stick ended up being one of the boy's longest lasting memories, even after he had almost entirely forgotten who he was. The governess not only taught him the 3 basic subjects of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also seemed to impart life lessons. At one point, she told him, "Nobody is ever given more to shoulder than he or she can bear." He would one day pass this knowledge on to Coraline so that she knew that she wasn't alone in her battle against the ancient creature. As a youngster, the ghost boy had long curly hair and wore breeches, a gown or dress-like article of clothing that young boys of about 2 to 8 years old were dressed in from the early 1500s to the early 1800s. Breeches were given as a rite of passage, most likely associated with toilet training. Maybe I need to get my cousin a pair of breeches before this Thanksgiving. The boy enjoyed eating cooked trout and boiled potatoes. As he got older, his family required him to have his curly hair cut short. He would be the earliest known target of the evil world-building entity referred to as the Beldam. She used her skills as a seamstress to make herself look like the boy's mother. He briefly explains how she manipulated him.
I walked through the scullery door, and I found myself back in the parlour, but she was waiting for me. She told me she was my other mama, but I never saw my true mama again.
The boy's soul was taken and hidden within a marble inside the other world from which the Beldam presides. The marble appears gray to most, but takes on a fiery ember color when viewed through a mystical adder stone. The same color as the tulips at his estate and the embers of fire burned in his nursery on cold winter evenings. Since they've all lost their individual identities, it's hard to tell who is who when they're speaking to Coraline. But using clues in the prose and the vocabulary that each character uses, I was able to go through and assign each line to one of the ghost children. We know the next one to be born is the girl who wasn't in the movie, because she at one point says, "This is the finest food I've eaten in centuries," implying that she is at least a couple hundred years old. So she's probably the one using words like thou, I, and carest, meaning she was probably born in the 1860s in Britain's Victorian era. Not much is known about this girl, but she is described as being a very pale child, dressed in what seem to be spider's webs, with a circle of glittering silver set in her blonde hair. We never learn her name, so I'm just gonna call her Goth Ghost Girl, which ironically is the same thing I call all of the girls that follow me on Instagram. She seems to really like flowers, and she possibly eats them. Coraline takes a great liking to her when they do finally meet, but unfortunately for her, she too was tricked and captured by the Beldam, dashing her opportunity to one day grow up. She expresses that her joy was taken from her, leaving her an empty husk with no heart or soul. The last of the children to be born was the tall ghost girl, who mostly uses more contemporary language with occasional exceptions. At the picnic in Coraline's dream, she's eating sliced bread and jam. Sliced bread wasn't invented until 1928, so I'll place her birth dates in the 1930s. She wore a brown shapeless dress and a brown bonnet that was tied under her chin, matching the color of her soul marble. She describes the Beldam feeding on her until there was nothing left, only snakeskins and spider husks. As the Beldam makes use of their souls for sustenance, they begin to lose their unique traits and their memories fade away. Their names are the first to be forgotten, and before long, they could not remember much of anything, including their own gender in life. But they do know what the Beldam did to them. Despite this, they do continue to exist in ghost form. What I'm about to say isn't confirmed, but I do have a theory about what the Beldam does with their human bodies. It's stated that the other mother could not create. She could only transform, twist, and change things that already existed. Her world is inhabited by other versions of the people in Coraline's world. These beings also serve as the Beldam's servants. There are 3 other humanoid entities: the other Miss Spink, the other Miss Forcible, and the other father. Remember, the other crazy man upstairs is really just a pack of rats in human clothing, and the other YB is not in the book. So we're left with these 3, 2 female and 1 male. I think these creatures were created by the other mother out of the deceased bodies of the 3 ghost children. Another century goes by until Coraline becomes the 4th known child lured into the other world by the other mother. As I mentioned near the beginning of this video, the Neil Gaiman novella Coraline is the canon material that I use as my basis when analyzing a character's history. The graphic novel, the movie, the video games, these are all adaptations. They aren't created by the original author, so they aren't considered canon. But there is one more piece of content in the Coraline canon. The audiobook, which is available on Audible, is narrated by the original author, Neil Gaiman. The spoken words in the audiobook are the same as the text in the novel, but this also means that the inflections, accents, and enunciations of the words can be analyzed when trying to determine the author's message, something I will be doing in future videos. I use Audible as the definitive version of the story. It even includes interludes with original music, including the very creepy Song of the Rats.
We have teeth and we have tails. We have tails. We have eyes. We were here before you fell. You will be here when we rise.
At Audible, you can find the largest selection of audiobooks, originals, and podcasts, which you can keep forever in your Audible library. Right now, Audible is hooking up horror history viewers with an amazing offer. Just visit audible.com/CZsWorld or text CZsWorld to 500-500 to start your 30-day trial. That's audible.com/CZsWorld. When Coraline refuses to comply with the other mother's request, she's thrown into the dark space behind the mirror and locked away there as punishment. It is here that she makes contact with the ghost children. She reaches around the dark room until she finds what seems to be a nose and lips. The tall girl warns her to keep her voice down, since the Beldam may be listening. When they find out that Coraline is still alive, they encourage her to flee, explaining that they've been trapped for a very long time, a time beyond reckoning. The boy is the one to suggest the idea that Coraline could try to win their souls back from the Beldam, and they all explain to her that they'd be unable to leave with her when the Beldam lets her out. Now, we belong to the dark, to the empty places. The light would shrivel us and burn. As Coraline curls up to sleep in the dark, damp area behind the mirror, one of the ghost children kisses her cheek and whispers an important clue, telling her to look through the stone. This is a reference to the Adder Stone given to Coraline by her neighbors. It possesses magical properties that will help her scan the other world for the location of the souls. Coraline tells the other mother about her encounter with the kids, and she says she must be planning the same for her, to which she responds that nobody sensible believes in ghosts anyway. Coraline searches the entirety of the Beldam's world and finds the boy's soul hidden in a toy chest, the tall girl's soul guarded by other versions of Spink and Forcible, and the goth ghost girl's soul protected by the rats in Mr. Bobo's apartment. After finding the first, the ghost boy urges her to hurry up and save the others, but after the second, the tall ghost girl wishes her to flee while she still has her life. The Beldam tries to throw her off by giving her the key to the empty flat, and the children try to warn her, saying that the Beldam does not mean well and they don't believe she would try to help Coraline. They're right, it's a trap. But Coraline is able to escape and with the help of the cats retrieve the final soul. The voice of the goth ghost girl gives her one more piece of advice.
She has lied to you. She will never give you up now she has you. She will no more give any of us up than she can change her nature.
This leads to the big confrontation, where Coraline tricks the other mother into opening the passageway between the two worlds so she can rescue her parents and escape. But the Beldam catches the door as she tries to pull it shut. Coraline suddenly becomes aware of other people in the corridor with her. Their hands move through her, and she feels their strength added to her own. The voices tell her to hold strong and pull, and with the added power, she's able to force the door shut, dismembering the Beldam's hand in the process. As she crosses back into her own world, the wraiths disappear. Upon getting back to her room, she removes the marbles from her pockets before going to sleep. That night, she dreamt of a picnic with the 3 children, who now had their human-like forms back. Perhaps rather than being ghosts, they were now angels. After eating, they play games in the meadow before having dessert. Coraline thanks them all for coming, but knows not all is well when a shadow crosses their faces. The kids thank her for saving them, but explain that for her, it isn't over quite yet, not until she's defeated the hand of the Beldam that continues to scuttle around in the real world. The Goth Ghost Girl's explanation implies that they may now move into the afterlife, saying that they'll now set out for uncharted lands, and what comes after, no one alive can say. But before moving on, they remind Coraline that she already has the traits necessary to defeat the Beldam, to be wise, brave, and tricky. The boy hugs her and tells her to take comfort in the fact that she's still alive, which is not that reassuring, especially coming from someone who just got killed by the thing she's about to fight. The children move away from her to a wooden bridge by a stream. They wave back at her before the dream goes into darkness. When Coraline awakes, the marbles that had contained the 3 souls are broken. Whatever had been inside them was gone. She places the fragments in a box before formulating her plan for taking down the other mother once and for all. Now, typically in a horror story, a ghost has some kind of unfinished business, and the spirit sticks around and haunts someone or something until its final scores are settled. However, it seems to me that these 3 kids were unable to move into the afterlife because they were no longer in possession of their own souls, and they were needed in order to move on. They don't seem to need to hang around until Coraline avenged them by trapping their killer at the bottom of the well. Though it is possible that they were just so confident in Coraline's abilities that they could go on and knowing that they'd already given all the advice they can give and that she would have no problem finishing the job. If you want to hear about the histories of other Coraline characters, click that playlist on the left. And drop me a comment about who you'd like to see me cover next. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive. To survive, get a vaccine, use a face mask, and social distancing.